German Shepherd, with head stuck in metal gate. What baby did next? Left everyone in tears. What this little girl found behind the rusty gate changed everything. The moment she made that split-second decision left everyone sobbing uncontrollably. If you're ready for a story that will touch your heart in ways you never expected, keep listening. And don't forget to comment where you're watching from. The crisp autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees, sending a cascade of red and gold leaves dancing across Lily's backyard. At just 5 years old, Lily Morgan had the kind of curiosity that both delighted and terrified her mother, Rachel. With her untamed honey-colored curls bouncing with each step and wide green eyes that seemed to drink in the world around her, Lily was the perfect image of childhood wonder. "Stay where I can see you, Lily," Rachel called from the kitchen window, her hands deep in soapy dishwater. "I'm almost done with these dishes, and then we can walk to the park." "Okay, Mommy," Lily shouted back, her attention already captured by a butterfly with electric blue wings that had landed on their fence. Rachel watched her daughter for a moment, a familiar ache squeezing her heart. Lily had her father's eyes, the same shade of green that seemed to shift like forest leaves in different lights. It had been just 8 months since Dr. Thomas Morgan had passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. The small house near Willow Creek Park felt emptier without his booming laugh and gentle presence, but his spirit lived on in their daughter. Lily crouched near a pile of leaves, poking at them with a stick when she heard it. A faint whimpering sound carried on the wind. She froze, her head tilting slightly as she tried to identify the source. The sound came again, louder this time, a painful cry that made something in her chest tighten. "Hello?" she called out softly, abandoning her stick and moving toward the edge of their yard, where a row of tall bushes separated their property from the abandoned Johnson estate next door. The crying sound grew more distinct, not human, but animal. Lily remembered what her daddy had taught her about animals in pain. "They're scared," he'd explained one day when they had found an injured squirrel, "and when animals are scared, they sometimes forget to be nice." But something about this cry pulled at her, like an invisible thread tugging her forward. She glanced back at the house. Her mother was still at the sink, back turned as she washed dishes. "I'll just look," Lily whispered to herself. "Just a quick peek." She squeezed through a gap in the bushes that she'd discovered months ago, her secret passageway to adventure. The old Johnson property had been empty for years. A faded for sale sign hung crookedly on a post, partially hidden by overgrown weeds. The once grand Victorian house stood in silent decay, its windows boarded up, paint peeling like old skin. The whimpering grew louder, punctuated by a scraping sound like metal against metal. Lily's heart pounded as she followed the noise around the side of the abandoned house, where a rusty iron gate separated the backyard from a narrow alleyway. What she saw made her gasp. A massive German Shepherd had somehow gotten its head stuck between 2 bars of the metal gate. The dog's powerful body trembled with exhaustion as it tried unsuccessfully to pull free. Its fur, once rich black and tan, was matted and dull, ribs pressed visibly against its skin, telling a story of hunger and neglect. As Lily approached, the dog's amber eyes locked onto her. A rumbling growl vibrated from its throat, teeth baring in a fearful warning. Lily stopped in her tracks, remembering her father's lessons. "Don't make eye contact if they're scared," he'd taught her. "Look down, talk soft, and move slow." She lowered her gaze and whispered, "Hi, doggy. I won't hurt you." The dog continued to growl, but there was a change in its tone, less threatening, more desperate. "You're stuck," Lily observed, inching closer but still maintaining a safe distance. "That must hurt really bad." The German Shepherd made another attempt to pull free, scraping its neck against the metal bars. A small trickle of blood appeared where the rusted edge had cut into its skin. "Stop! Stop!" Lily pleaded, her eyes filling with tears. "You're making it worse!" The dog went still, its heavy panting the only sound between them. Its eyes, though wary, seemed to hold an intelligence that Lily recognized, the same thoughtful gaze her father's therapy dog had possessed. "I'm going to help you," Lily promised, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "but I need you to trust me." The enormity of the situation suddenly hit her. How could she, a tiny 5-year-old, possibly free this massive dog from solid metal bars? The gate was old and rusted, but still sturdy. The gap where the dog's head was trapped looked barely wider than her forearm, but something in her refused to walk away. This was exactly the kind of thing her daddy would have helped with. He never turned away from animals in need, even the scary ones. That's what made him a special vet, her mother always said. He saw past the fear to the hurt underneath. Lily took a deep breath and sat cross-legged on the ground, just out of the dog's reach. "My name is Lily," she said conversationally, as if they were meeting at a park. "What's your name?" The dog had stopped growling, its breath coming in ragged pants as it watched her with cautious eyes. "That's okay if you don't want to tell me," Lily continued. "My daddy said animals talk in different ways. We just have to learn how to listen." She noticed a faded leather collar around the dog's neck, partially visible behind the metal bar. There was something written on it, though the letters were worn almost to illegibility. X? She sounded out slowly. "Is your name Max?" The dog's ears twitched slightly at the sound. "Max," she repeated more confidently. "That's a good name. Strong, like you." Lily remembered how thirsty she got when she cried, and realized the trapped dog must be incredibly thirsty after all its struggling. "You need water," she murmured, looking around. There was no bowl or container nearby. She bit her lower lip, thinking, then cupped her small hands together the way her father had shown her when they'd gone hiking. "I'll be right back, Max. Don't go anywhere, okay?" She hurried back through her secret passage and to the garden hose coiled at the side of her house. After turning it on to a gentle trickle, she filled her cupped hands with water and carefully made her way back to the gate, trying not to spill too much. By the time she reached Max, less than half the water remained in her palms, but it was better than nothing. She approached slowly, extending her hands toward the dog's muzzle. Max eyed her suspiciously, nostrils flaring at the scent of water. "It's okay," Lily whispered. "Just a drink." After a moment's hesitation, Max extended his tongue and lapped desperately at the water in her hands. When it was gone, Lily made 3 more trips, each time returning with water that the dog drank with increasing trust. On her 4th return, she noticed Max was no longer growling at all. His body still trembled with exhaustion, but his eyes had softened, following her movements with something that wasn't quite trust yet, but no longer fear. "My daddy was a doctor for animals," Lily told Max as she settled back down near him. "He helped animals when they were hurt or scared. He taught me lots of things." The memory of those lessons washed over her, clear as yesterday. "The most important thing to remember, Lilybug," Dr. Thomas Morgan had said as they sat together in his veterinary clinic after hours, "is that scared animals aren't mean animals. They're just afraid." 6-month-old Lily had watched wide-eyed as her father gently examined a trembling stray cat that had been brought in with an injured paw. "See how she's hissing? She's telling us she's scared," Thomas explained, his voice a low, soothing rumble that seemed to calm both his daughter and the frightened feline. "So, we need to show her we're not scary." He demonstrated by averting his gaze slightly, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, and speaking in a soft, even tone. "Never stare directly at a scared animal," he advised. "In animal language, that's like saying, 'I'm going to attack you.'" Instead, he showed Lily how to blink slowly, how to approach from the side rather than looming over the top, and how patience was more important than speed. "Animals can feel what's in our hearts," he'd told her, guiding her small hand to gently stroke the cat once it had calmed. "If we're scared, they stay scared. If we're calm, they can learn to be calm too." Throughout the years, Thomas had included Lily in his work whenever possible, letting her observe from a safe distance as he treated all manner of creatures, from hamsters to horses. He taught her that treats weren't bribes, but bridges of trust, that voices should drop lower instead of higher when an animal was afraid, and that sometimes the bravest thing was to simply sit still and wait. "Remember, Lilybug," he had said during their last lesson together, just weeks before his death, "when helping an animal, you must move at their pace, not yours. Patience isn't just waiting, it's listening with your whole self." Now, sitting before the trapped German Shepherd, those lessons echoed in Lily's mind with crystal clarity. Max was watching her with those intelligent amber eyes, and something in them reminded her so much of her father that tears pricked at the corners of her vision. "My daddy's gone now," she told Max, her voice barely above a whisper. "He went to heaven. That's what Mom says. But I think he sent me to find you." Max made a soft sound, not quite a whine, not quite a bark, almost as if responding to her confession. Lily scooted a little closer, moving slowly as she'd been taught. "Can I touch your paw?" she asked, extending her hand palm up on the ground between them. Max stared at her hand, Then, after several long moments, stretched his front paw forward until it barely touched her fingertips. Lily felt a surge of victory. "Good boy, Max," she whispered, fighting the urge to lunge forward and hug him. That would break the fragile trust they'd established. Instead, she gently stroked his paw with one finger, then two, then her whole hand. As the minutes passed in this careful dance of trust-building, Lily noticed more details about the trapped dog. The collar wasn't just worn. It looked military-grade, with strange markings partially visible on the inside. Max's appearance, despite his current state, suggested he wasn't an ordinary stray. His ears were perfectly shaped, his build powerful even in his malnourished state. "You're not just any dog, are you?" Lily mused aloud. "You're special." Max's eyes seemed to confirm her assessment, holding a depth of understanding that transcended ordinary animal awareness. He was clearly in pain and exhausted, but there was a dignity in his bearing that hadn't been broken by whatever hardships he'd endured. Lily tried pushing at the bars, then pulling them, but her small arms lacked the strength to make any difference. The metal was solid and unyielding, rusted in place after years of neglect. "I need tools," she said firmly, a new determination filling her voice. "And butter. Daddy used butter once when a cat got stuck in a fence." She stood up slowly. "I'll be back, Max. I promise. Don't be scared." Max made a soft whining noise as she turned to leave, almost as if begging her not to go. "I have to get help," she explained, as if he could understand every word. "But I'll come back. I won't leave you alone." She reached out, hesitated, then gently stroked the top of his head between his ears. Max closed his eyes briefly at her touch. "That's a promise," Lily whispered, "and Daddy always said promises to animals count double." With that solemn vow hanging in the air between them, she turned and ran back toward home, her mind racing with plans. She'd need tools, food, water, and maybe her mother's help, though she worried her mom would be angry about her wandering into the abandoned property. As she squeezed back through the bushes into her yard, the first drops of rain began to fall from clouds that had gathered unnoticed during her encounter with Max. The weather was turning, adding new urgency to her rescue mission. Lily Morgan was just 5 years old, small in stature but mighty in determination. The trapped German Shepherd had awakened something fierce within her, a protective instinct inherited from her father. In that moment, standing at the edge of her yard with raindrops dampening her curls, she made a decision that would set in motion events far beyond anything she could imagine. She wouldn't just help this dog, she would save him, no matter what it took. Rachel Morgan scrubbed the last plate and placed it in the drying rack, glancing out the kitchen window to check on Lily. Her heart rate quickened when she didn't immediately spot her daughter's distinctive curls among the autumn leaves. "Lily," she called, wiping her hands on a dish towel and moving toward the back door. A swift scan of the yard revealed no sign of the 5-year-old. "Lily Morgan, answer me right now." The familiar mixture of fear and frustration, a cocktail all too common in the months since Thomas's death, coursed through Rachel's veins. Lily had become more adventurous, more willful since losing her father, as if testing the boundaries of a world that had suddenly proven itself unreliable. Rachel stepped onto the porch just as Lily burst through the bushes at the property line, her clothes smudged with dirt and her expression urgent. "Where have you been?" Rachel demanded, relief and anger competing in her voice. "I've told you 1,000 times not to go beyond our yard." "Mommy, there's a dog," Lily exclaimed, undeterred by her mother's scolding. "A big dog with his head stuck in a gate. He's hurt and scared and hungry, and I promised to help him." Rachel sighed, running a hand through her auburn hair. "Lily, you know better than to approach strange dogs. They can be dangerous, especially if they're hurt or frightened." "But I did it like Daddy taught me," Lily insisted, grabbing her mother's hand and tugging. Slow and quiet and not looking in his eyes. "His name is Max and he needs us, Mommy. Please." The mention of Thomas's lessons made Rachel hesitate. Her late husband had indeed taught their daughter extraordinarily well about animal behavior, perhaps too well. The skills he'd shared were meant to be used under adult supervision, not by a kindergartner wandering alone. "Honey, if there's really a dog in trouble, we should call animal control. They have the right equipment and training to—" "No!" Lily's face crumpled. "They'll take too long. Max is bleeding where the gate is hurting him. And it's starting to rain. Please, Mommy. Daddy would help." Those last 3 words struck Rachel like a physical blow. Thomas would help. Of course he would. He never turned away from an animal in need. regardless of the inconvenience or potential danger. It was what had made him an exceptional veterinarian, and what had drawn Rachel to him all those years ago, when he'd stopped traffic to help a limping stray cross a busy intersection. The first fat raindrops began to fall more steadily, punctuating the moment of decision. "All right," Rachel conceded, her voice softening. "Show me this dog, but we're going to be very careful. If I think it's too dangerous, we're coming straight back home and calling professionals. Deal?" Lily's face transformed with relief and hope. "Deal! We need butter and tools and maybe a blanket because he looks cold." Rachel raised an eyebrow at her daughter's detailed rescue plan, but found herself moving to the kitchen to gather supplies. She packed a small first aid kit from Thomas's old veterinary bag, a bottle of water, some leftover chicken from dinner, a tub of butter, and a set of basic tools. As an afterthought, she grabbed her phone to call for help if needed, and a raincoat for Lily. "Put this on," she instructed, helping Lily into the yellow slicker. "Now, lead the way, but stay right beside me." Lily nodded solemnly and took her mother's hand, guiding her toward the gap in the bushes. As they pushed through onto the abandoned Johnson property, Rachel felt a pang of unease. She'd never trespassed before, and the decaying grandeur of the old Victorian house loomed ominously in the increasing rainfall. The property had been vacant for years following old Mr. Johnson's death, becoming the subject of local children's ghost stories and teenagers' dares. "This way," Lily urged, pulling Rachel around the side of the house toward the rusted gate that separated the property from the alley beyond. When they rounded the corner, Rachel stopped short. Lily hadn't exaggerated. A large German shepherd was indeed trapped, its head wedged between two bars of the gate. The dog's body tensed at their approach, a low growl rumbling from its throat. "It's okay, Max," Lily said immediately, her voice dropping to the gentle tone Thomas had taught her. "This is my mommy. She's going to help you." To Rachel's amazement, the dog's growling subsided, though its amber eyes remained wary as they fixed on her. "My God," Rachel whispered, taking in the animal's condition. Even from this distance, she could see the dog was severely malnourished, its coat dull and matted. A small amount of blood had dried where the metal bars had cut into its neck, and fresh abrasions were forming as the rain made the rusted metal slicker. "See? I told you he needed help," Lily said, a hint of accusation in her voice. "You were right," Rachel admitted, carefully setting down their supplies and assessing the situation. The gate was old but sturdy, the bars set close together. The dog must have been trying to squeeze through when it got stuck, but why it had tried was a mystery. What had it been running from, or toward? Rachel approached slowly, mirroring the techniques she'd seen Thomas use countless times. "Hey there, boy," she said softly, crouching down to appear less threatening. "Looks like you're in quite a predicament." Max's eyes tracked her movements, intelligence and wariness battling in their amber depths. "He likes water," Lily offered, hovering nearby. "I gave him some in my hands, but he needs more." Rachel poured some water into the cupped lid of the butter container and cautiously offered it to the trapped dog. Max drank eagerly but neatly, his manners suggesting he'd once been well trained. "Good boy," Rachel murmured. As the dog drank, she examined the situation more closely. The gap was just wide enough for the dog's head to have pushed through, but too narrow for his skull to pull back out. The metal was old but still strong. This wouldn't be an easy extraction. "What do we do, Mommy?" Lily asked, her small face pinched with concern, as the rain fell more heavily around them. Rachel considered their options. Butter might help reduce friction, but the gap needed to be widened, at least slightly. She rummaged through the tools she'd brought, finding a screwdriver and a small wrench. "We need to widen the gap just enough for him to pull free," she explained to Lily. "I'm going to try to work these bars apart just a little bit. You stay back, okay?" Lily nodded, though she remained close enough to maintain eye contact with Max, whispering reassurances to the dog as Rachel worked. The rain made everything slippery and difficult. Rachel worked the screwdriver into the joint where one bar connected to the crossbeam, trying to loosen the ancient fastening. The rust fought her efforts, refusing to give way easily. After several minutes of struggle, Rachel sat back on her heels in frustration. "This is tougher than I thought. We might need something with more leverage." "What about Daddy's big tools?" Lily suggested, her clothes now soaked despite the raincoat. "The ones in the garage?" Rachel nodded thoughtfully. Thomas had kept a more extensive collection of tools in their garage, including some that might be more effective against the stubborn gate. "Good thinking, sweetie, but one of us needs to stay with Max." She glanced at the worsening weather. "And you need to get dry." "I'll stay," Lily insisted, her chin set in the stubborn angle that was so reminiscent of her father. "Max trusts me. I promised him I wouldn't leave." Rachel hesitated, torn between practicality and her instinct to protect her daughter from both the elements and a potentially dangerous animal. But something in Lily's determined expression, and the way the dog seemed genuinely calmer in her presence, swayed her. "All right, but take shelter under the porch overhang there." She pointed to a small covered area nearby. "And do not touch the dog while I'm gone. Just talk to him. Keep him calm. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mommy," Lily promised solemnly. Rachel arranged the raincoat to better protect her daughter, placed the water and some chicken pieces within Lily's reach, and stood up. "I'll be back as quickly as I can," she promised, already mentally cataloging which of Thomas's tools might help. "Stay right here." As Rachel jogged back toward their home, the rain cascading around her, she found herself praying that this rescue mission wouldn't end in heartbreak for her already wounded daughter. Lily had lost so much when Thomas died. Rachel wasn't sure how the child would cope if this dog couldn't be saved. Left alone with Max, Lily settled cross-legged under the minimal shelter of the porch overhang, just out of the worst of the rain, but still close enough to maintain her connection with the trapped dog. "My mommy's gone to get better tools," she explained to Max, whose eyes followed her movements with a trust that hadn't been there when they first met. "She'll be back soon." The German Shepherd made a soft sound, almost a sigh, as he shifted his weight to find a more comfortable position within his confines. "You must be so tired," Lily sympathized. "And hungry, too." She carefully tore a small piece of chicken from the container her mother had left and held it out toward Max. "Here, this will help you feel stronger." Max stretched his neck as far as his trapped position would allow, gently taking the offered food from her fingers. His teeth, which could easily have crushed her small hand, were carefully controlled, demonstrating an extraordinary gentleness. "You're a good dog," Lily whispered, feeling brave enough to scoot a little closer. The rain formed a curtain around them, isolating their small patch of shelter like an island in a storm. As she fed him more small pieces of chicken, Lily noticed again the strange markings on the inside of Max's collar. In the better light, she could make out what looked like numbers and letters, a code of some kind, with the partial phrase "Canine Unit" visible through the grime. "Were you a police dog?" she asked, suddenly understanding his exceptional training and intelligence. "Daddy worked with police dogs sometimes. He said they were the smartest, bravest dogs in the world." Max's ears perked forward at her words, almost as if he understood and appreciated the compliment. The rain intensified, drumming against the metal of the gate and the roof of their small shelter. A chill seeped into Lily's bones despite the raincoat, but she refused to move further under the overhang, unwilling to increase the distance between herself and the trapped dog. "Don't worry," she assured Max, her voice steady despite her shivering. "We won't leave you. I promised, and promises to animals count double." In response, Max's eyes locked with hers, communicating something beyond what words could express, a connection that transcended the barriers between species. In that moment, as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain poured from leaden skies, a bond was forged between a small, grief-touched girl and a mysterious dog with secrets trapped behind his amber eyes. Neither knew it yet, but their lives had become irrevocably intertwined, setting in motion events that would challenge, heal, and ultimately transform them both in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. Rachel returned to find Lily exactly where she'd left her, huddled under the overhang and talking softly to the trapped German Shepherd. The storm had intensified, wind driving the rain in sheets that reduced visibility to mere yards. She carried Thomas's heavy-duty toolbox, the weight of it a reminder of her late husband's strength and capability, qualities she now needed to channel. "How's our patient?" Rachel asked, setting down the toolbox and crouching beside her daughter. "He ate all the chicken," Lily reported, her teeth chattering slightly from the cold. "And he let me touch his ears." Rachel nodded, impressed by the trust her daughter had established with the frightened animal. "Good job, sweetie. Now, let's see if we can get him free." She opened the toolbox and selected a pry bar and a set of bolt cutters, tools Thomas had used during a volunteer mission to rescue animals after a hurricane. The memory of his passionate dedication to that work gave her a surge of determination. "I'm going to try to widen the gap," she explained to Lily, who watched with wide, hopeful eyes. "Stay back a bit, okay? If this works, Max might move suddenly." Rachel approached the gate slowly, speaking in low, calm tones to Max as she assessed the best point to apply leverage. The dog watched her warily, but without aggression, seeming to understand her intent. She positioned the pry bar at the junction, where one of the bars met the crossbeam, and began to apply steady pressure. The ancient metal groaned in protest, flakes of rust breaking free like scabs from an old wound. "Come on," Rachel muttered through gritted teeth, her muscles straining against the unyielding iron. Rain plastered her hair to her face and neck, running into her eyes as she fought against both the elements and the stubborn gate. After several minutes of effort, the bar shifted slightly, maybe half an inch of give in the rusted joint. Not enough. Rachel repositioned and tried again, throwing her full weight against the lever. This time, there was a creaking sound, as the bar bent slightly but still refused to give way enough to free the dog. "It's not working," she admitted, frustration evident in her voice. Lily's face fell, but only for a moment before determination replaced disappointment. "What about those?" She pointed to the bolt cutters. Rachel considered the tool. "It might work, but I'd have to cut through the entire bar, which won't be easy with this old metal." "Can we try?" Lily pleaded. "We can try," Rachel agreed, picking up the heavy cutters. "But we need to be careful. When metal cuts, sometimes sharp pieces can fly off." She positioned herself in the cutter carefully, making sure Lily was well back. Max seemed to sense the importance of the moment and remained absolutely still, his amber eyes fixed on the humans working to free him. Rachel positioned the blades around one of the bars and squeezed the handles with all her strength. The resistance was immediate and fierce, the ancient metal unyielding against the pressure. "It's too thick!" she gasped after a full minute of effort that produced nothing more than a slight indentation in the bar. Lily's face crumpled. "But we have to help him." Rachel sat back on her heels, rain streaming down her face as she tried to come up with another solution. The storm was worsening, and soon the daylight would begin to fade. They couldn't leave the dog trapped overnight in these conditions. She scanned the contents of the toolbox again and spotted the hacksaw. It would take time, but it might be their only option. "We'll try cutting through," she decided, pulling out the saw, "but it's going to take a while." As Rachel began the laborious process of sawing through the metal bar, Lily continued to comfort Max, keeping him calm with gentle words and occasional sips of water. The minutes stretched into nearly an hour of Rachel's persistent effort, her arms burning with fatigue as the saw made agonizingly slow progress through the rusted iron. "Almost there," she encouraged herself, ignoring the blisters forming on her palms. The storm raged around them, but nothing could deter her now. Thomas would have done this and more for an animal in need. She could do no less. Finally, with a grating screech, the saw broke through the bar. Rachel immediately repositioned to begin work on the second cut needed to create a gap wide enough for Max's head. As she worked on the second cut, Lily noticed Max becoming increasingly agitated, his ears flicking back and forth, as if hearing something beyond the storm's fury. "What's wrong, boy?" she asked, stroking his wet fur. A low rumble started in Max's chest, not directed at them, but at something beyond their small circle of activity. His hackles rose despite his exhaustion. "Mommy," Lily whispered urgently, "I think he hears something." Rachel paused in her sawing, listening. At first, there was only the sound of rain and wind, but then, faintly, came the sound of an engine, followed by the slam of a car door. "Someone's here," Rachel said, tension evident in her voice. They were, after all, trespassing on private property. "Is it the police?" Lily asked, both hopeful and fearful. "I don't think so," Rachel replied, straining to see through the curtain of rain toward the front of the property. "No flashing lights." Max's growl deepened, a warning vibrating through his massive frame. Whatever, or whoever, was approaching, the dog clearly perceived it as a threat. "Keep working," Lily urged her mother. "We need to get him out." Rachel nodded and resumed her sawing with renewed urgency, the blade biting deeper into the metal with each stroke. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, accompanied by male voices muffled by the storm. "Almost there," Rachel murmured, more to herself than to Lily or Max. The saw was 3/4 of the way through the bar when a flashlight beam cut through the rainy gloom, illuminating their desperate rescue attempt. "Hey! What are you doing there?" a gruff voice called out. Rachel turned to see two men approaching, their forms bulky in dark raincoats. The shorter one held the flashlight, while the taller man's hand rested near his hip in a way that made Rachel instinctively push Lily behind her. "My daughter found this dog trapped in the gate," Rachel explained, trying to keep her voice steady. We're just trying to free him." The taller man stepped closer, his face coming into view, hard-featured with a day's growth of beard and eyes that assessed the situation with cold calculation. "That's none of your concern, lady," he said, his tone clipped. "This is private property. You're trespassing." "We know," Rachel admitted, "but we couldn't just leave him." The man's gaze shifted to Max, and something passed between them, a flash of recognition that sent another warning growl rumbling from the German shepherd's throat. "We'll handle this," the shorter man said, moving forward. "You folks should get home before this storm gets any worse." There was something in his overly casual tone that raised Rachel's internal alarms. These men weren't property owners or security guards. Their interest in Max seemed specific and concerning. Lily clutched at her mother's jacket. "Mommy, they're the bad guys," she whispered, with a child's unerring instinct. "Max is scared of them." Rachel made a split-second decision, grabbing the pry bar from the ground and standing to her full height. "We're not leaving until this dog is free," she stated firmly. "He needs medical attention." The taller man's face hardened. "This doesn't concern you," he repeated, his hand moving to his pocket. "The animal is valuable property. We've been looking for it." "He," Lily corrected from behind her mother, her small voice surprisingly strong. "Not it. His name is Max." The man's eyebrow raised in surprise, his gaze focusing more intently on the child. "How do you know that name?" he asked sharply. "It's on his collar," Lily answered, unaware of the significance of her words. The two men exchanged glances loaded with meaning. "The collar's intact," the shorter one murmured. "That means—" "I know what it means," the taller one cut him off. His attention returned to Rachel, his expression hardening. "Step away from the dog. Now." Rachel tightened her grip on the pry bar. "No. Whatever your interest in this animal, he's clearly afraid of you. That tells me everything I need to know." "Lady, you have no idea what you're getting involved in," the man warned, his hand now clearly reaching for something concealed beneath his coat. Before the confrontation could escalate further, Max suddenly gave an enormous heave, throwing his entire weight against the weakened bars. With a sharp crack, the partially sawed bar gave way, creating just enough space for the German shepherd to wrench his head free. For a brief, glorious moment, Rachel felt triumph surge through her. They'd succeeded, but the victory was short-lived as Max collapsed immediately upon freeing himself, his legs buckling beneath him, too weak from exhaustion and malnourishment to support his weight. "Max!" Lily cried, running to the fallen dog before Rachel could stop her. The two men moved forward simultaneously. "Get away from it," the taller one ordered, finally pulling what Rachel now saw was a tranquilizer gun from his pocket. In that moment, with adrenaline coursing through her veins and her child crouched vulnerably beside the fallen dog, Rachel made a decision that would change their lives forever. She swung the pry bar, not at the men, but at the ancient lock securing the gate itself. The lock shattered with a satisfying crack, and the gate swung open with a mournful creak of protest. "Lily, help Max up," Rachel commanded, positioning herself between the men and her daughter. "We're getting out of here." Lily, with the fearlessness of a child who hadn't yet learned the full scope of human dangers, wrapped her small arms around Max's neck and pressed her face against his wet fur. "Please get up," she begged. "We need to go." Whether it was Lily's plea, some reserve of strength, or the imminent threat posed by the approaching men, Max struggled to his feet. His legs trembled violently, but he stood, pressing his massive body protectively against Lily's tiny frame. "Stop right there," the shorter man called, both now advancing rapidly. Rachel grabbed Lily's hand. "Run!" she shouted, pulling her daughter through the open gate with Max staggering alongside them. They burst into the alleyway beyond, the rain momentarily blinding them as they sought escape, right or left. Rachel made a split-second choice, tugging Lily to the right, away from the direction the men's vehicle must be parked. Behind them came sounds of pursuit, cursing, the metallic clang of the gate, splashing footsteps. The tranquilizer gun fired with a muffled thud, the dart missing them but embedding itself in a wooden fence post, inches from Rachel's head. "This way," Rachel gasped, spotting a narrow gap between two buildings. She pulled Lily into the passage, Max somehow finding the strength to follow, despite his weakened condition. The passageway opened onto another residential street, mercifully empty in the storm. Rachel oriented herself quickly. They were now several blocks from home, but heading in that direction would be the first place their pursuers would look. "We need somewhere safe," she panted, scanning the unfamiliar street for options. "There," Lily pointed to a dilapidated garden shed nestled at the back of an overgrown lot. It wasn't ideal, but the storm was worsening by the minute, and they needed immediate shelter to regroup. They stumbled across the lot, the rain turning the ground to mud that sucked at their shoes. Max limped alongside them, his breathing labored, but his determination matching their own. The shed door was secured with a simple latch, rusted but functional. Rachel yanked it open, ushering Lily and Max inside before following and pulling the door shut behind them. Darkness enveloped them, broken only by the faint gray light filtering through a small, dirt-streaked window. The shed smelled of damp earth and old fertilizer, but it was dry and, for the moment, safe. "Are you okay?" Rachel asked, gathering Lily into her arms and checking her for injuries. Lily nodded, her small body shivering from cold and fear. "Is Max okay?" They both turned to the German Shepherd, who had collapsed onto his side, his flanks heaving with exhaustion. In the dim light, Rachel could see that their rescue had come none too soon. Beneath the matted fur, Max's body was a map of old scars and recent wounds, telling a story of prolonged mistreatment. "He needs rest," Rachel said, removing her jacket despite her own chill and draping it over the trembling dog. "And food, clean water, probably antibiotics." "Will the bad men find us?" Lily whispered, stroking Max's head with gentle fingers. Rachel wished she could offer reassurances, but the determined pursuit they'd just fled suggested these men wouldn't give up easily. Whoever they were, they wanted Max badly enough to chase a woman and child through a storm with a weapon. "I don't think they saw where we went," she said instead, "but we need to be quiet until we're sure they're gone." Lily nodded, her eyes wide with understanding beyond her years. She settled herself beside Max, her tiny hand resting protectively on his shoulder. Outside, the storm intensified, rain hammering against the shed's roof, like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. Thunder rolled across the sky in waves, each crash making Lily flinch slightly. "I don't like storms," she admitted in a small voice. To Rachel's surprise, Max raised his head at Lily's words and shifted his massive body, curling protectively around the child, as if understanding her fear. Despite his own pain and exhaustion, the dog positioned himself between Lily and the door, a guardian stance that couldn't be mistaken for anything else. "He's protecting you," Rachel observed, amazed by the bond that had formed so quickly between her daughter and this mysterious animal. "Because we protected him," Lily said with the simple wisdom of childhood. "That's what Daddy always said. Animals know who the helpers are." The mention of Thomas brought a fresh ache to Rachel's heart. What would he make of their current situation? Huddled in a stranger's garden shed with a possibly stolen dog, hiding from men with tranquilizer guns in the middle of a thunderstorm? He would have loved every minute of it, she realized with a pang of bittersweet certainty. Thomas had lived for this kind of animal rescue adventure. The more challenging, the better. As if reading her thoughts, Max turned his amber gaze to her, something like understanding passing between them. This wasn't just any dog. There was an intelligence in those eyes that spoke of special training and purpose. Rachel moved closer, examining the collar more carefully in the dim light. The tag Lily had mentioned was there, with Max barely legible on the worn metal. But more interesting were the markings on the inside of the collar, a series of numbers and letters that looked like a service identification code, partially obscured by grime and wear. "K9 unit," she read aloud, brushing away dirt with her thumb to reveal more of the text. "J157, something, Hayes." Max's ears perked forward at the last word, his head lifting slightly. "Hayes?" Rachel repeated experimentally. The dog's reaction was unmistakable, a soft whine and increased alertness, as if the name held special significance. "I think that's his handler's name," Rachel murmured, the pieces beginning to fall into place. "You're a police dog, aren't you, boy?" Max gave another soft whine that seemed almost like confirmation. "But why would anyone steal a police dog?" Rachel wondered aloud. "And keep him prisoner for how long?" The questions multiplied in her mind, each more disturbing than the last. If Max was indeed a service dog, his disappearance would have been investigated. The fact that he hadn't been found, and that these men were so determined to recapture him, suggested something far more sinister than a simple dog napping. A particularly violent thunderclap shook the small shed, startling all three occupants. Lily buried her face against Max's fur, and the dog responded by curling even more protectively around her, his body forming a living barrier between the child and any potential threat. Rachel watched this interaction with a mixture of wonder and concern. In just hours, her daughter and this dog had formed a bond that defied explanation, as if they somehow recognized in each other something essential and kindred. "He's not scared of the thunder," Lily observed, her voice muffled against Max's fur. "Police dogs are trained to stay calm in all kinds of situations," Rachel explained, remembering what Thomas had told her about service animals. Loud noises, crowds, even gunfire. Is that why the bad men want him back? Because he's special? Rachel hesitated, uncertain how much to share with her 5-year-old. Maybe. Or maybe he knows something they don't want anyone else to know. The moment the words left her mouth, Max's head snapped up, his gaze fixing on her with such intensity that Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. It was as if she had inadvertently stumbled upon the truth. "That's it, isn't it?" she whispered, moving closer to examine the dog more carefully. "You know something." Max's fur, though matted and dirty, felt oddly textured in certain places along his back and sides. Not just the roughness of neglect, but something more deliberate. Rachel ran her fingers gently along a raised ridge near his shoulder blade and felt something beneath the skin. Small and hard, definitely not natural. "There's something embedded in his fur," she murmured, parting the matted hair to get a better look. In the dim light, she could just make out a tiny metallic object, no larger than a grain of rice, securely attached to the dog's skin. "I think it's a tracking device." The realization hit her with chilling clarity. If Max was being tracked, their hiding place wouldn't remain secret for long. The men would have equipment to follow the signal right to them. "We need to remove it," Rachel decided, her nursing training kicking in as she assessed the best approach. The device appeared to be attached to the surface of the skin rather than implanted, likely a hasty addition rather than a professional installation. She rummaged through her pockets and found a small multi-tool Thomas had given her years ago, a birthday present she'd initially thought impractical but had carried out of sentiment since his death. Now, its tiny scissors and tweezers might prove their salvation. "This will hurt a little," she warned Max, though whether a dog could understand such a warning was debatable. Yet, as she positioned the tweezers near the device, Max remained perfectly still, as if comprehending the necessity of the procedure. With steady hands, Rachel carefully detached the small tracker from Max's fur, wincing in sympathy as the adhesive pulled at his skin. Once removed, she held up the tiny device, an elegant piece of technology that blinked with a faint red light, broadcasting their location to whoever held the receiver. "What do we do with it?" Lily asked, eyeing the tracker with apprehension. Rachel thought quickly. "We need to move it far away from us." She moved to the shed's small window and peered out. The storm continued unabated, sheets of rain reducing visibility to mere feet. No sign of their pursuers, but that didn't mean they weren't nearby. "I'm going to throw it," she decided, "as far as I can in the opposite direction from where we'll go." She cracked the door open slightly, tension singing through her veins as she scanned the immediate area for any sign of the men. Seeing nothing but rain-swept darkness, she drew back her arm and threw the small device with all her strength. It disappeared into the storm, hopefully leading their hunters on a wild goose chase and buying them precious time. Rachel shut the door and secured the latch, turning back to find Lily examining something else on Max's collar. "Mommy, look at this," her daughter said, pointing to markings on the inside of the leather that Rachel hadn't noticed before. "There are scratches, but they look like someone made them on purpose." Rachel leaned closer, squinting in the poor light. Sure enough, there were deliberate markings scratched into the leather. Not random damage, but intentional symbols. They looked like crude letters and numbers, possibly carved with a paperclip or similar improvised tool. "Best you for 2, Rachel deciphered slowly. PIER 7. "What does it mean?" Lily asked. "I'm not sure," Rachel admitted, though the mention of a pier suggested a location, perhaps a meeting point or a hiding place for something important. "But I think someone went to a lot of trouble to hide this information." Max watched them with those intelligent eyes, the set of his ears and the tension in his body, suggesting these markings held significant meaning. The dog had clearly been part of something important, and potentially dangerous, before ending up trapped in that abandoned property. The storm's fury began to abate slightly, the thunder now a more distant rumble, and the rain lessening from torrential to merely heavy. Rachel checked her phone, no signal, likely due to the storm interference. "We should wait a little longer," she decided. "Make sure those men are well away before we move." Lily nodded, snuggling closer to Max, who responded by resting his massive head gently on her lap. The tableau they created, tiny girl and huge dog, each comforting the other, brought unexpected tears to Rachel's eyes. In the midst of danger and uncertainty, this peculiar bond shone like a beacon of something pure and uncomplicated. "He likes me," Lily whispered, a hint of wonder in her voice. "Of course he does," Rachel smiled. "You saved him. Animals don't forget kindness." "Or cruelty," she added silently, thinking of Max's scars and the men who had pursued them with such determination. Whatever this dog had been through, he'd endured it and survived, his spirit unbroken despite what must have been months of mistreatment. As they sat in the dim shelter, each lost in their own thoughts, while the storm gradually subsided outside, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something much larger and more dangerous than a simple animal rescue. Max wasn't just any lost dog, and those men weren't ordinary pet owners searching for a runaway. The markings on the collar, the tracking device, the dog's obvious specialized training, and the men's desperate pursuit all pointed to something sinister. A mystery with Max at its center, a mystery that now, for better or worse, had ensnared Rachel and Lily as well. Outside, in the lessening rain, a flashlight beam cut through the gloom, scanning the overgrown lot with methodical precision. The beam paused on the shed for a heart-stopping moment, then moved on, following the false trail left by the discarded tracker. Inside, unaware of their narrow escape, Rachel stroked Max's head and made a silent promise, to this dog and to her late husband's memory, that she would see this through, whatever this turned out to be. Thomas would have done no less. Lily had fallen asleep, her small body curled trustingly against Max's protective bulk, her breathing deep and even, despite their precarious situation. The German Shepherd remained alert, his ears swiveling to track sounds outside, his body positioned to shield the child from any threat that might come through the door. As the last of the thunder faded into the distance, Rachel found herself wondering what twist of fate had brought this specific dog to that specific gate on this specific day, where her particular daughter would find him. Coincidence seemed too small a word for such precise cosmic choreography. Whatever forces had aligned to bring them together, Rachel sensed that their lives had been irrevocably changed. For good or ill, they were now part of Max's story, and he was part of theirs. Have you ever had an unexpected encounter with an animal that changed your life? Or felt an instant connection with a dog the way Lily did with Max? Rachel gently shook Lily awake as the first gray light of dawn filtered through the shed's dirty window. They had spent an uncomfortable night huddled together on the earthen floor, but at least they were safe, for now. "Time to go, sweetie," Rachel whispered, brushing Lily's tangled curls from her face. Lily blinked awake, momentarily confused by their surroundings until her gaze fell on Max. The German Shepherd was already alert, his amber eyes fixed on the door, ears shifting to track sounds beyond their shelter. "Is Max coming home with us?" Lily asked, her voice thick with sleep. Rachel hesitated. The responsible thing would be to contact animal control or the police about the dog. But after yesterday's encounter with the men hunting Max, she wasn't sure who could be trusted. If Max truly was a police dog as his collar suggested, why hadn't he been reported missing? Why were civilian men with tranquilizer guns trying to recapture him? Yes, she decided, at least until we figure out what's going on. Rachel cracked the shed door open and peered outside. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a washed clean world glittering with water droplets. No sign of their pursuers, but that didn't mean they were gone. "We need to be careful," she warned Lily. "Stay close to me, and if I say run, you run. Understand?" Lily nodded solemnly, her small face serious beyond her years. She placed her hand on Max's head. "Max will protect us." The confidence in her daughter's voice gave Rachel pause. Despite his weakened condition, there was something undeniably impressive about the German Shepherd's alertness and focus. Whatever training he'd received hadn't been erased by his ordeal. "Let's go," Rachel decided, taking Lily's hand. They slipped out of the shed into the early morning stillness. Max limped alongside them, his movements stiff but determined. Rachel oriented herself quickly. They were about half a mile from home, in a neighborhood of older houses set back from the road with large, overgrown yards. "This way," she murmured, choosing a route that would keep them on side streets and away from main roads where they might be spotted. They had gone perhaps 100 yards when Max suddenly froze, a low growl rumbling in his chest. His hackles rose as he stared intently at a parked SUV with tinted windows at the end of the block. "What is it, boy?" Rachel whispered, instinctively pulling Lily closer. The SUV's engine started with a purr that seemed unnaturally loud in the dawn quiet. Max's growl deepened, and he shifted his body to stand between them and the vehicle. "It's them!" Lily gasped, clutching her mother's hand tighter. The SUV pulled away from the curb and began moving slowly in their direction, like a predator that had scented prey. "Back this way," Rachel urged, retreating the way they had come. "Quick, but don't run yet." They ducked between two houses, cutting through a yard with an unmowed lawn soaked from the previous night's rain. Behind them, the SUV's tires could be heard turning onto the same street, still moving with that deliberate, unhurried pace. "They're following us," Lily whispered, fear evident in her voice. "It's okay," Rachel assured her, though her own heart was racing. "We know these neighborhoods better than they do." They emerged onto the next street over, Rachel's mind racing through possible safe havens. Their own home wasn't an option. It would be the first place the men would look once they lost visual contact. They needed somewhere unexpected, somewhere, or someone, who could help them. "Mr. Thompson," Rachel suddenly remembered, "he lives just 3 blocks from here." Peter Thompson was their elderly neighbor, a retired man who lived alone in a well-kept bungalow at the edge of the neighborhood. Thomas had often helped him with yard work and household repairs, forming a friendship despite their age difference. If anyone would take them in without asking too many questions, it would be him. "This way," Rachel directed, guiding Lily across the street and down a narrow walking path that connected to the next block. Max limped alongside them, occasionally glancing back, clearly aware of the pursuit. His breathing was labored, each step clearly painful, but he pressed on with remarkable determination. They had almost reached the outlet of the path when the sound of a car door slamming echoed behind them. The men must have spotted them and abandoned their vehicle to pursue on foot. "Run!" Rachel urged, no longer bothering with stealth. They burst from the path onto a quiet residential street, startling an early morning jogger who gave them a curious look as they rushed past. Rachel led the way, taking a circuitous route through yards and between houses to throw off their pursuers. Max kept pace despite his injuries, occasionally looking to Rachel for direction, but mostly moving with his own purpose, as if he understood the gravity of their situation. "Almost there," Rachel encouraged as they turned onto Maple Street, where Mr. Thompson lived. They were halfway down the block when they heard the shouts behind them. Their pursuers had closed the gap more quickly than expected. Rachel chanced to look back and saw the 2 men from yesterday, now joined by a third, running in their direction. "That's Mr. Thompson's house." She pointed to a tidy blue bungalow with white trim and a wraparound porch. "Hurry!" They rushed up the front walk, Max somehow finding the energy to keep up, despite his weakened state. Rachel pounded on the door, praying the elderly man was awake at this early hour. "Mr. Thompson, it's Rachel Morgan! Please, we need help!" For a heart-stopping moment, there was no response. Then came the sound of movement inside, followed by the click of locks being disengaged. The door opened to reveal Peter Thompson, a tall, lean man in his 70s with a shock of white hair and the straight-backed posture of someone with military experience. He took in their disheveled appearance, the frightened child, and the exhausted German shepherd with a single comprehensive glance. "Inside," he said without hesitation, stepping back to allow them entry. "Quickly." They rushed in, and Mr. Thompson closed the door behind them, throwing the deadbolt and chain with practiced efficiency. Through the front window, Rachel could see their pursuers slow to a walk as they approached the house, trying to appear casual now that their quarry had found shelter. "Thank you," Rachel breathed, her legs suddenly weak with relief. "I'm sorry to bring trouble to your door, but we didn't know where else to go." Mr. Thompson's weathered face creased with concern as he assessed Max's condition. "You found yourself in a spot of bother with this one, haven't you?" he said, not unkindly. "German shepherd, male, probably 4 to 5 years old. Military or police training, unless I miss my guess." Rachel blinked in surprise. "How did you—" 27 years with the police department, Mr. Thompson explained, kneeling with surprising agility to examine Max more closely. "Canine unit supervisor for 15 of those. I know a service dog when I see one." Max, for his part, seemed to recognize a kindred spirit in the elderly man. The tension in his body eased slightly as he submitted to the examination, though his attention remained fixed on the front door. "He was trapped in a gate at the old Johnson place," Lily piped up. "We saved him, but then bad men came." Mr. Thompson's bushy eyebrows rose as he gently examined the abrasions on Max's neck where the gate had trapped him. Bad men, eh? And who might they be? I don't know, Rachel admitted. 2 men yesterday, 3 today. They had a tranquilizer gun. They seemed very determined to get Max back. And now they're outside my house, Mr. Thompson observed, glancing through the window blinds at the men who were now standing on the sidewalk, openly watching the property. Interesting. He moved to a side table and picked up a cordless phone. First things first, let's call your mother. She must be worried sick. Rachel felt a pang of guilt. In the chaos, she hadn't even thought to call her mother, who was undoubtedly frantic by now. Yes, please, thank you. As Mr. Thompson made the call, Rachel led Lily to the couch, both of them sinking into the comfortable cushions with exhausted relief. Max settled at their feet, his body still on alert but his eyes heavy with fatigue. Your mother says she'll be here in 10 minutes, Mr. Thompson reported after a brief conversation. Says she's been looking for you all night. He hung up and turned his attention back to Max, his expression thoughtful. Now, about this dog. He knelt again, this time examining the collar more carefully. May I? At Rachel's nod, he unbuckled the worn leather collar and held it under the light, turning it to study the markings inside. Well, well, he murmured, his voice suddenly charged with interest. K9 and 157 DPCT, Officer Daniel Hayes. Max's head snapped up at the name, a soft whine escaping him. You know this dog? Rachel asked, hope flaring in her chest. Not personally, Mr. Thompson said, still studying the collar, but I know the unit designation. This is, or was, a dog from the Downtown Precinct Counter-Trafficking Task Force. Special unit, very hush-hush. They were working on breaking up a major trafficking operation about, must be 3 years ago now. What happened? Rachel asked, though something in the old man's tone suggested the story didn't have a happy ending. Mr. Thompson's face grew solemn. The handler, Officer Hayes, was killed during an operation, shot while investigating a warehouse near the river. His body was recovered, but his canine partner was never found. Max, Lily whispered, reaching down to stroke the dog's head, you lost your person too. The parallel to their own loss wasn't lost on Rachel, who felt a fresh wave of sympathy for the German Shepherd. No wonder he and Lily had bonded so quickly. They shared a common wound. The official report said the dog was presumed killed as well, Mr. Thompson continued, his voice dropping to ensure Lily wouldn't hear all the details. But there were always rumors, whispers that the operation had been compromised from the inside, that Officer Hayes had been set up. Rachel absorbed this information with growing unease. And now these men are hunting Max? Why? After all this time? Mr. Thompson's expression turned grim. That's the question, isn't it? What does this dog know? Or what might he lead someone to? That's worth so much effort 3 years later. He returned the collar to Max, who accepted it with dignity, but made no move to leave Lily's side. I think, Mr. Thompson said slowly, that I should make another call. I still have contacts in the department. Captain Rivera was a rookie under my supervision. She's head of the K9 division now. She should know about this. As the elderly man moved away to make his call, Rachel glanced out of the window again. The 3 men were still there, one speaking intently into a cell phone, while the others maintained their vigil on the house. Are we safe here? She asked when Mr. Thompson returned. For now, he assured her. Captain Rivera is sending officers right away, and I may be retired, but I'm not defenseless. He gestured discreetly toward a locked cabinet that Rachel suspected contained firearms. Former police officers tend to make thorough home security arrangements. Lily, exhausted by the night's ordeal, had curled up on the couch, her small body gradually relaxing into sleep. Max positioned himself on the floor directly in front of her, his body forming a protective barrier between the child and the door. He's very attached to her, Mr. Thompson observed. She was the first one to find him, Rachel explained. She spoke to him, calmed him down. It was remarkable to watch. Dogs know, the old man said simply. They can sense things about people that we miss, especially dogs with his kind of training. Something in his tone made Rachel look more closely at Max. What kind of training would that be exactly? Counter-trafficking dogs are special, Mr. Thompson explained, lowering his voice so as not to disturb Lily. They're trained not just to detect drugs or explosives, but to recognize patterns, Signs of human trafficking, hidden compartments, false documentation. They develop an almost uncanny ability to sense when something isn't right. He paused, studying Max with newfound respect. But this one, there was something else going on with Officer Hayes' unit. Something classified. I'm not privy to the details, but there were rumors that they were using the dogs in new ways, training them to locate specific evidence, recognize certain individuals in any disguise. Rachel absorbed this information, her gaze shifting between the sleeping child and the vigilant dog. Whatever secrets Max carried, they were significant enough to keep men hunting him years after his handler's death. "Captain Rivera should be here in about 20 minutes, Mr. Thompson said, checking his watch. "In the meantime, you both could use some food, and so could our four-legged friend here." He moved to the kitchen and began preparing a simple meal of toast, eggs, and bacon. For Max, he put together a mixture of cooked ground beef, rice, and cottage cheese. "Easy on the stomach, but nutritious," he explained, when Rachel raised an eyebrow at the dog's meal. "He's malnourished, but we don't want to shock his system with too much rich food at once." Max ate with controlled hunger, his manners impeccable despite his obvious starvation. When finished, he immediately returned to his position guarding Lily. "Remarkable animal," Mr. Thompson murmured, watching the dog settle in. "To maintain his training and temperament after whatever he's been through, he must have been exceptional to begin with." Rachel was about to respond when a sharp crack echoed from outside, the unmistakable sound of glass breaking. Max was on his feet instantly, a deep growl rumbling from his chest as he positioned himself between the window and Lily. Mr. Thompson moved with surprising speed for his age, grabbing Rachel and pulling her away from the window just as another crack sounded, and a small object sailed through the newly broken pane. "Get down!" he shouted, covering Rachel with his body as the object, which she now recognized as a brick, thudded onto the carpeted floor. Lily woke with a startled cry, and Max was instantly at her side, using his body to shield her as Mr. Thompson had done for Rachel. "Is it a bomb?" Rachel gasped, her heart pounding. "No," Mr. Thompson said grimly, picking up the brick with a handkerchief. "It's a message." Wrapped around the brick was a piece of paper secured with a rubber band. Mr. Thompson carefully removed it and unfolded the note. "Give us the dog and the evidence, or the next one won't miss," he read aloud, his voice hard with anger. "Charming fellows." Rachel scrambled to Lily, gathering her frightened daughter into her arms. "What evidence? We don't have anything." "They think you do," Mr. Thompson said, moving to the window to peer cautiously through the broken pane. "Or they think Max can lead them to something. Either way, they're escalating." Outside, the men had retreated to their vehicle but remained parked within sight of the house. "The police will be here soon," Mr. Thompson assured them, though his expression was troubled. "But I think we need to understand what we're dealing with here." He turned to Rachel with a seriousness that sent a chill down her spine. "What exactly did you find when you were examining Max last night? You mentioned markings on his collar, but was there anything else?" Rachel described the tracking device they had removed and the scratched markings inside the collar, BS-042 and PIER-7. Mr. Thompson's expression sharpened with recognition. PIER-7, that's at the old industrial harbor. It was abandoned years ago when the new shipping terminal was built. And BS-42, he frowned, thinking hard. That could be a container number. Shipping containers usually have a code of letters and numbers like that. "You think Officer Hayes hid something there?" Rachel asked, the pieces starting to fall into place. "And trained Max to find it?" "It would explain why they have kept looking for him all this time," Mr. Thompson nodded. "And why they didn't just eliminate him when they killed Hayes. They need him to find whatever evidence Hayes concealed." The implications were chilling. For 3 years, these people had kept Max alive but imprisoned, likely trying to either extract information from him or force him to lead them to the evidence. His escape and subsequent trapping in the gate had been a desperate bid for freedom that had almost ended in tragedy. But why would Hayes scratch the location on Max's collar? Rachel wondered. Why not just hide the evidence better? "Insurance," Mr. Thompson said grimly, "in case something happened to him," which it did. A terrible understanding dawned on Rachel. He knew he was in danger. He was leaving a breadcrumb trail that only another officer would recognize. "Precisely," Mr. Thompson confirmed. "And now these men think you're part of whatever investigation Hayes was conducting. They believe you have the evidence or know where it is." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension, bringing a moment of relief to the room. Help was coming, but their relief was short-lived. Through the window, they saw the men's SUV pull away with haste, disappearing around the corner just as two police cruisers turned onto the street from the opposite direction. "They'll be back," Mr. Thompson said with certainty. "Men like that don't give up easily." Max, who had maintained his protective stance throughout the exchange, relaxed slightly at the sound of the sirens, his training recognizing the promise of allies. As the police cars pulled up outside, Lily looked up at her mother with wide, frightened eyes. "Are we in big trouble, Mommy?" Rachel hugged her daughter close, wishing she could shield her from the danger they'd unwittingly stumbled into. "No, sweetie, we're the good guys, remember? We're helping Max, and now the police are going to help us." But as she caught Mr. Thompson's concerned gaze, Rachel knew their ordeal was far from over. They had rescued Max from the gate, only to become entangled in a web of corruption and danger that had already claimed one life. The German Shepherd pressed against Lily's side, his amber eyes meeting Rachel's with an almost human understanding. Whatever secrets he carried, they were now bound together in them, for better or worse. Outside, car doors slammed as officers approached the house. Mr. Thompson moved to answer the door, but paused to place a reassuring hand on Rachel's shoulder. "Trust Captain Rivera," he advised quietly, "but no one else. Not until we know how high this goes." The morning sunlight streamed through the broken window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny warning beacons. In the distance, the men's SUV could be seen turning around, circling back toward the neighborhood from a different approach. A game of cat and mouse had begun, with Max, Lily, and Rachel caught in the middle. The next few hours would determine not just their safety, but perhaps the resolution of a 3-year-old mystery that had already cost Officer Hayes his life. As Mr. Thompson opened the door to the arriving officers, Max positioned himself between Lily and the newcomers, his posture alert but not aggressive, a guardian awaiting verification of friend or foe. The stage was set for a confrontation that had been brewing for 3 long years, triggered by a little girl's compassion and a dog's desperate bid for freedom. The truth was about to unravel, one dangerous thread at a time. What would you do if you found yourself suddenly protecting an animal that others were desperate to capture? Would you risk everything to keep them safe? Captain Sandra Rivera was not what Rachel had expected. Instead of the gruff, hardened stereotype of a police captain, Rivera was a composed woman in her early 40s with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She entered Mr. Thompson's living room with controlled urgency, her gaze immediately finding Max and lingering there with visible surprise. "My God," she breathed, "it really is him." Max's reaction to Rivera was immediate and telling. His posture shifted from wary guardian to attentive professional, ears forward, body alert but not tense. He recognized police authority. "Captain," Mr. Thompson greeted her with a respectful nod, "thank you for coming personally." "Peter," Rivera returned the nod before addressing Rachel. "Mrs. Morgan, I understand you and your daughter found this dog." Rachel explained their discovery of Max trapped in the gate, the subsequent rescue, and the men who had pursued them with such determination. Rivera listened intently, occasionally glancing at the German Shepherd, as if confirming details through his presence alone. "And you found markings on his collar?" Rivera asked. "BSW-42 and Pier 7? "Yes," Rachel confirmed. Mr. Thompson thought it might refer to a shipping container. A shadow passed over Rivera's face. "He's right. BSDAS are the prefix for Black Sea Worldwide Shipping. They operate primarily out of the Eastern Terminal, but 3 years ago they had a small auxiliary operation at the old industrial harbor where Pier 7 is located. That's where Officer Hayes was investigating when he was killed," Mr. Thompson added, his voice quiet but firm. Rivera's gaze snapped to the retired officer. "You've been keeping tabs on the case." It wasn't a question, but Mr. Thompson answered anyway. "Daniel Hayes was one of my trainees. His death never sat right with me." "Nor with me," Rivera admitted. She turned her attention to Lily, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, her small hand buried in Max's fur. "Hello there. You must be Lily. That's very brave, what you did for Max." Lily looked up shyly. "He was stuck. I had to help him." "Of course you did," Rivera smiled, though the expression didn't quite reach her eyes. She was clearly troubled by the situation. "And now, we're going to help all of you." She straightened, addressing Rachel directly. "Mrs. Morgan, I need to be clear about something. What you've stumbled into is an active investigation. one that we thought had gone cold years ago. The men pursuing you and Max are dangerous, and they're likely connected to a criminal organization that we've been trying to dismantle for years." "What exactly was Officer Hayes investigating?" Rachel asked. Rivera hesitated, glancing at Lily. Understanding the unspoken concern, Rachel gently suggested her daughter might like to see Mr. Thompson's kitchen, perhaps get a snack. To her surprise, Lily went without protest, though Max seemed torn between following the child and staying to hear information that clearly pertained to him. "Stay, Max," Rivera commanded softly, using the professional tone that service dogs were trained to respond to. Max obeyed, settling onto his haunches but keeping his gaze fixed on the doorway through which Lily had disappeared. Once the child was out of earshot, Rivera continued in a lower voice. Officer Hayes was part of a specialized unit investigating human trafficking operations run by the Kozlov Syndicate. They're an international organization with ties to Eastern Europe, primarily dealing in drugs, weapons, and human cargo. Rachel felt sick at the thought. "And they killed Officer Hayes?" "Yes," Rivera confirmed grimly. "He was getting too close to something big. We believe he had obtained evidence that could identify the local leadership and their connections to city officials." "Corrupt cops?" Mr. Thompson asked bluntly. Rivera's expression tightened. "We've never been able to prove it, but yes, that's the suspicion. Hayes was working mostly on his own toward the end. Said he couldn't be sure who to trust. Which is why he encoded the location of the evidence on Max's collar," Rachel realized. "He was creating a backup that only another canine officer would think to check." "Exactly," Rivera nodded. "Hayes was brilliant with his dogs. He trained them to recognize patterns in individuals that most handlers wouldn't even attempt. Max here was his finest work, a dog that could not only detect trafficking victims, but could identify specific members of the organization by their scent alone, regardless of disguise." "A living witness," Mr. Thompson murmured. "More than that," Rivera corrected. "A living evidence collection system. Max was trained to react to certain individuals in ways that would stand up in court as identification, but they had to eliminate Hayes before he could complete his documentation of Max's training protocols." Rachel glanced at the German Shepherd with renewed respect. "So, that's why they kept him alive all this time." "They needed him to find whatever evidence Hayes had hidden," Rivera confirmed. "But Max was too well trained to cooperate with them. Dogs like him bond completely with their handlers. They can't be coerced or retrained easily, especially not for criminal purposes." "And now they think we have the evidence," Rachel said, the full danger of their situation sinking in. "Or that you know where it is," Rivera agreed, "which makes you and Lily targets." The blunt assessment sent a chill through Rachel. One minute they had been rescuing a trapped dog. The next, they were entangled in a deadly game with organized criminals. "What do we do?" she asked, instinctively looking toward the kitchen where Lily was. "First we get you somewhere safe," Rivera decided. "Then we use what we know to finally close this case." She pulled out her phone and began making arrangements, speaking in clipped, professional tones to someone on the other end. When she finished, she turned back to Rachel. "I'm having a safe house prepared. You, Lily, and Max will stay there under protection until we can resolve this. Officer Chen here," she gestured to a younger officer who had been standing quietly by the door, "will remain with you as your primary security." Rachel felt overwhelmed but nodded her agreement. What choice did they have? "What about the evidence?" Mr. Thompson asked. "If it's still at Pier 7 after all this time—" "It might not be," Rivera acknowledged, "but it's our best lead. I'm assembling a team to check it out." "Max should go with you," Rachel suggested. "If Hayes trained him to find it—" "Absolutely not," Rivera cut her off. "Max stays with you and Lily. Those men are still out there, and they'll be watching for any police movement toward the pier. Besides," her voice softened slightly, "Max has clearly bonded with your daughter. Separating them now would be difficult." As if to emphasize the point, Max rose and moved toward the kitchen, clearly unwilling to remain separated from Lily any longer. "I see what you mean," Rivera observed with a faint smile. "We'll work with what we have for now. The shipping container number is enough to start with." Officers were dispatched to secure the perimeter of Mr. Thompson's house, while arrangements for the safe house were finalized. Rachel used the time to call her mother and explain that she and Lily would be away for a few days, carefully obscuring the details of their situation to avoid causing panic. Through it all, Max remained vigilant, his attention divided between monitoring the officers moving around the house and keeping close to Lily. The dog's physical condition was still concerning. His ribs showed through his dull coat, and the abrasions on his neck from the gate were angry and red, but his spirit seemed undiminished. "He needs veterinary care," Rachel pointed out to Rivera as they prepared to leave. "We'll arrange it at the safe house," the captain promised. "We have police veterinarians who can be trusted." Just as they were about to depart, Mr. Thompson pulled Rivera aside for a private word. Rachel couldn't hear what was said, but the captain's expression grew troubled, and she glanced repeatedly at one of the officers on her team, a heavy-set man with a perpetually sour expression who had been introduced as Detective Wilkins. The journey to the safe house was tense but uneventful. They traveled in an unmarked police van with tinted windows, Officer Chen driving while Rivera followed in a separate vehicle with additional officers. Max sat between Rachel and Lily in the back seat, his body tense and alert throughout the drive. The safe house turned out to be a modest bungalow in a quiet suburban neighborhood, unremarkable by design. Inside, it was Spartan but functional: basic furniture, stocked kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and comprehensive security systems. "It's not the Ritz," Officer Chen commented as he showed them around, "but it's secure. Reinforced doors, bulletproof windows, and direct alarm connection to the precinct." "Thank you," Rachel said, setting down the small bag of emergency supplies Rivera had allowed them to collect from their home under police escort. "How long do you think we'll need to stay here?" Officer Chen, a young man with a serious demeanor but kind eyes, shrugged. "Hard to say. Captain Rivera moves fast, but these investigations can be complicated. Could be days, could be weeks." The thought of being confined indefinitely was daunting, but Rachel focused on the positive. They were safe, and they were helping to solve a case that had claimed at least one life already. As promised, a police veterinarian arrived that afternoon to examine Max. The vet, Dr. Patel, was a gentle, efficient woman who treated the German Shepherd with professional respect. "He's malnourished and dehydrated," she reported after her examination. "Multiple healed injuries consistent with both old trauma and more recent abuse. The abrasions on his neck from the gate are infected and will need antibiotics. But considering what he's been through, he's in remarkably good condition." "Will he be okay?" Lily asked anxiously, refusing to leave Max's side during the examination. Dr. Patel smiled at the child. "With proper care and plenty of love, he'll make a full recovery. He's a fighter, this one." She left them with medications, special food, and care instructions, promising to return in a few days to check on Max's progress. As evening fell, Rachel tried to establish some normalcy for Lily's sake. They prepared dinner together in the safe house kitchen, set up a makeshift bed for Max near Lily's room, and even found a few children's books on a shelf in the living room. Officer Chen maintained a professional distance, positioning himself near the front windows where he could monitor the street while giving them privacy. Occasionally, his radio would crackle with updates from Rivera's team, but he shared little of what he heard. After tucking Lily into bed, Rachel returned to the living room, too wired with anxiety to sleep. To her surprise, Max did not remain with Lily, but followed her, settling on the floor near her chair with a soft sigh. "Keeping an eye on both of us, huh?" Rachel murmured, reaching down to stroke the dog's head. Max leaned into her touch, his amber eyes watching her with that unsettling intelligence. "He's splitting the difference," Officer Chen observed quietly from his position. "Staying where he can hear the child, but see you. Classic protection behavior." Rachel studied the young officer with new interest. "You know service dogs?" Chen nodded. "My brother trains them for veterans with PTSD. I've picked up a few things." Their conversation was interrupted by the ringing of Chen's secure phone. He answered it, listening intently before his expression darkened. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice low. "When?" Another pause. "Understood. We'll maintain position." He hung up and turned to Rachel, his professional demeanor unable to fully mask his concern. "What is it?" she asked, dread pooling in her stomach. "Captain Rivera's team found the shipping container at Pier 7, Chen reported. But they were too late. Someone had been there recently, within the last few hours. The container was empty except for signs of a struggle and blood." Rachel felt her throat tighten. "They knew we'd look there." "Yes," Chen confirmed grimly. "They must have realized the information was on Max's collar when you removed the tracking device." "Are Rivera and her team okay?" "They're fine," Chen assured her. "But this complicates things. We're back to square one on the evidence, and now they know we're actively investigating." Rachel's mind raced. The marking on the collar, Could it have been a decoy? Something to throw them off the real location? Chen considered this. It's possible. Hayes was clever enough to plan for multiple contingencies. If I were hiding something that important, Rachel thought aloud, something that powerful people would kill for, I wouldn't make it easy to find, even with a clue. Max lifted his head suddenly, ears perked forward as if responding to her words. He rose to his feet, moving with purpose toward the small backpack Rivera had allowed them to fill with personal items from their home. "What is it, boy?" Rachel asked, following the dog's movements. Max nudged the backpack insistently, whining softly. Officer Chen watched with professional interest. "He's alerting to something." Rachel opened the backpack and emptied its contents onto the coffee table. A change of clothes for Lily, a few toiletries, Lily's favorite stuffed rabbit, and a framed photo of Thomas that Rachel had grabbed on impulse. Max's attention fixed immediately on the photo, his nose touching the glass as he whined again. "The picture of my husband?" Rachel asked, confused. "Why would—" She broke off, a sudden thought striking her. Thomas had been a veterinarian with connections to the police department. He had occasionally treated service animals, including— "Oh my God," she breathed. Thomas knew Officer Hayes. He treated the canine unit dogs. Chen straightened, suddenly alert. "Your husband was the department's consulting veterinarian?" "Yes, for several years before his death," Rachel confirmed, memories clicking into place. "He mentioned Hayes a few times, said he was doing groundbreaking work with scent training." She picked up the photo frame, examining it more closely. It was a simple shot of Thomas in his clinic, smiling at the camera with his arm around a German shepherd that had just had surgery. "This isn't Max," she said slowly, studying the dog in the photo. "But it could be from the same unit." Chen moved closer, examining the photo. The timing fits. Hayes was killed 3 years ago, and these specialized dogs require years of training before field deployment. If your husband was treating them— "He might have known about the evidence," Rachel finished, the implication staggering her, "or even helped Hayes hide it." Max's behavior seemed to confirm their theory. He kept nosing at the photo, whining with increasing urgency. "But Thomas never mentioned anything about this case," Rachel objected to her own theory. "Surely he would have said something if he was involved in something so dangerous." "Not necessarily," Chen countered gently. "If Hayes was keeping things compartmentalized for safety, your husband might have only known his part, maybe providing a hiding place without knowing exactly what he was hiding." Rachel's mind raced through possibilities. Thomas had been meticulous in his work, keeping detailed records of every animal he treated. If he had helped Hayes, there might be some record of it in his old files that were still in boxes in their garage, unexamined since his death. "I need to check my husband's records," she told Chen urgently. "They might contain information about Hayes and Max." Chen looked skeptical. "Even if they do, we can't risk returning to your house right now. Those men will be watching it." "Then have someone bring the files here," Rachel insisted. Thomas kept everything organized by year and client. The K9 unit records would be clearly labeled. Chen considered this for a moment, then nodded. "I'll run it by Captain Rivera. If she approves, we can have officers retrieve the files discreetly." He stepped away to make the call, leaving Rachel alone with Max, who had settled down once he seemed satisfied they understood his message. "You're trying to tell us something," Rachel murmured, stroking the dog's head. "Something about Thomas and Hayes and whatever they were hiding." Max's intelligent eyes met hers, and for a moment, Rachel felt as if they were having a real conversation. Two beings united in purpose despite the barriers of species. Chen returned, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Captain Rivera is sending a team to your house. They'll extract the files and bring them here under cover of darkness. With luck, we'll have them by morning." Rachel nodded, relief mixing with a new kind of anxiety. What would they find in Thomas's records? Had her gentle, compassionate husband been involved in a dangerous investigation without her knowledge? The thought was both troubling and strangely fitting. Thomas had always gone above and beyond for animals and their handlers. As if sensing her turmoil, Max pressed against her leg, offering silent support. Despite everything they had been through, despite his own trauma and injuries, this remarkable dog was still focused on his mission. And now, somehow, that mission included them. "We should try to get some rest," Chen advised. "Tomorrow may be a long day." Rachel nodded, though she doubted sleep would come easily. She checked on Lily, who was peacefully asleep, unaware of the new developments. Max followed her, performing his own inspection of the child's room, before settling on the floor beside the bed. "You'll stay with her?" Rachel asked softly. Max's steady gaze was answer enough. Nothing would harm Lily while he was on guard. Rachel returned to the living room, her mind too full for sleep. She sat by the window, watching the quiet street outside while Chen maintained his position by the door. "Officer Chen," she said after a while, "do you think we'll find it? Whatever evidence Hayes was killed for?" The young officer considered the question carefully before answering. "I think Max wouldn't still be trying if there wasn't something to find. These dogs don't give up on their mission, even years later. If Hayes trained him to protect that evidence, he'll lead us to it eventually." The quiet confidence in his voice was reassuring. Rachel turned back to the window, watching as a light rain began to fall, softening the edges of the unfamiliar neighborhood. Somewhere out there, the men who had pursued them were still searching. Somewhere, the evidence that could bring down a trafficking organization was hidden, waiting to be found. And somehow, through a series of events that seemed too precisely aligned to be coincidence, Lily had found the one dog who could unravel it all. Rachel thought of her late husband, wondering if he had somehow known what would unfold years after his death. Had Thomas understood the importance of what Hayes had entrusted to him? Had he left his own breadcrumb trail, knowing that someday it might be needed? The question swirled in her mind as the rain tapped gently against the window pane, a soothing rhythm that eventually lulled her into an uneasy sleep in the chair. She dreamed of Thomas and Max running side by side through a field, a small metal box clutched in her husband's hand, his voice calling back to her, "Keep it safe, Rachel. When the time comes, keep it safe." Morning arrived with the sound of a secure vehicle pulling up outside the safe house. Rachel, who had dozed fitfully in the chair, was instantly alert. Officer Chen, who had maintained his vigil through the night, moved to the window to verify the vehicle's occupants. "It's Detective Wilkins," he reported, "with the files from your house." Rachel felt a flutter of both hope and apprehension. Whatever Thomas had known about Hayes and his investigation might soon come to light. As Chen moved to open the door, Max suddenly appeared in the hallway, hackles raised, a low growl building in his throat as he stared at the entrance. "Max?" Rachel questioned, alarmed by the dog's reaction. Officer Chen froze, his hand hovering over the door lock. "He's alerting to something, or someone." Through the window, Rachel could see Detective Wilkins standing beside the unmarked police car, a box of files in his arms. There was nothing overtly threatening in his appearance, but Max's reaction was undeniable. "Don't open it," Rachel said suddenly, trusting the dog's instincts. "Something's wrong." Chen hesitated, clearly torn between protocol and the warning signals from the highly trained canine. "He's a police officer, Mrs. Morgan. He has the files you requested." "And Max is trained to identify members of the trafficking organization," Rachel countered, moving away from the window. "Call Captain Rivera. Verify that she sent Wilkins specifically." Chen's expression shifted from doubt to cautious agreement. He stepped away from the door and pulled out his secure phone, maintaining visual contact with Wilkins through the window. The detective outside was growing visibly impatient, shifting the box in his arms and checking his watch. Max's growl deepened, his body vibrating with tension as he placed himself between Rachel and the door. Chen's conversation was brief but illuminating. His expression darkened as he listened to whatever Rivera was saying on the other end. When he hung up, his hand moved immediately to his service weapon. "Rivera didn't send Wilkins," he confirmed in a low voice. "She sent Officers Martinez and Cho with the files. They should be arriving in about 10 minutes. Rachel felt a chill run through her. "So, who is that outside?" "That's what we need to find out," Chen said grimly. "Get Lily and go to the safe room at the back of the house. Lock yourselves in and don't come out until I or Captain Rivera gives you the all clear." Rachel didn't wait to be told twice. She hurried to Lily's room, scooping up her sleeping daughter and making for the reinforced interior room Chen had shown them during their orientation to the safe house. Behind her, she could hear Chen radioing for immediate backup as Max remained at the front door, his warning growl now a continuous rumble of threat recognition. The safe room was small but secure, concrete walls, reinforced door, emergency supplies, and a direct communication line to the police station. Rachel settled Lily, still groggy with sleep, onto the small cot inside. "What's happening, Mommy?" the child asked, sensing the tension despite her drowsiness. "Just a precaution, sweetie," Rachel assured her, trying to keep her voice calm. "We need to stay in here for a little while." She had expected Max to follow them into the safe room, but the German Shepherd remained with Officer Chen, apparently unwilling to leave the young officer to face the threat alone. Through the communication system, Rachel could hear the escalating situation in the front of the house. Chen's voice was professional but tense as he spoke through the door to the man claiming to be Detective Wilkins. "I need to verify your authorization code, Detective. Captain's orders." There was a pause, then Wilkins's voice, now stripped of its earlier professional veneer. "Open the damn door, Chen. Don't make this complicated." "No authorization, no entry," Chen responded firmly. "Captain Rivera is en route. Why don't you wait for her to clear things up?" The sound of something heavy hitting the front door echoed through the house. Max's bark joined the commotion. No longer a warning, but a full-throated challenge. "Mommy, I'm scared," Lily whimpered, clutching Rachel's arm. "It's okay, baby," Rachel soothed, though her own heart was racing. "The police are coming to help us." More sounds of struggle reached them, shouting, something crashing. Then the unmistakable pop of gunfire. Lily screamed, and Rachel pulled her daughter close, shielding her with her body as they huddled on the floor beside the cot. The next few minutes passed in a blur of fear and confusion. More shots, the sound of breaking glass, sirens approaching in the distance. Through it all, Max's barking continued, savage, determined, unwavering in his defense. Then, abruptly, silence. Rachel held her breath, straining to hear any indication of what had happened. Lily trembled in her arms, her small face buried against her mother's shoulder. The communication line crackled to life. "Mrs. Morgan," Captain Rivera's voice, tense but controlled. "Are you and Lily all right?" "Yes," Rachel managed, her voice shaking. "We're in the safe room. What happened? Is Officer Chen okay?" There was a brief pause before Rivera answered. "Chen is injured but stable. The man posing as Detective Wilkins has been apprehended. It's safe to come out now." Relief flooded through Rachel, though it was quickly tempered by concern for the young officer who had protected them. "And Max?" Another pause, longer this time. He's been hurt. We have emergency veterinary services on the way, but you should prepare Lily. It doesn't look good." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. After everything the brave dog had survived, years of captivity, starvation, the gate, the chase, to be injured now, protecting them. "I understand," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady for Lily's sake. "We're coming out." As she helped Lily to her feet, Rachel struggled to find words to explain what had happened. How did you tell a child who had already lost her father that the dog she had rescued, the dog who had become her protector and friend, might not survive? In the end, she simply held Lily's hand tightly and opened the safe room door, stepping out to face whatever waited for them, knowing that their lives had been irrevocably changed by a chance encounter with a German Shepherd, trapped in a metal gate, a dog who, even now, was fighting one last battle on their behalf. What price would you be willing to pay to uncover the truth? Have you ever witnessed an animal's extraordinary courage in a moment of crisis? The scene that greeted Rachel and Lily as they emerged from the safe room was one of controlled chaos. Police officers moved purposefully through the house, securing evidence and attending to the wounded. Officer Chen sat on the couch, grimacing as a paramedic bandaged his shoulder. "Chen!" Rachel hurried to the young officer's side. "Are you okay?" He managed a tight smile. "Just a graze. I've had worse playing football." But Rachel could see the pain in his eyes despite his brave front. He had put himself between them and danger without hesitation. "Thank you," she said simply, knowing no words could fully express her gratitude. Chen nodded in acknowledgement, then his expression grew somber. "Max is in the kitchen with the emergency vet team." Rachel hesitated, glancing at Lily, who was taking in the scene with wide, frightened eyes. How much should she shield her daughter from? After a moment's consideration, she decided that honesty, tempered with hope, was the best approach. "Sweetie," she knelt to Lily's level, "Max got hurt protecting us. The doctors are helping him right now, but he's very sick. We need to be brave for him, okay?" Lily's lower lip trembled, but she nodded with a determination beyond her years. "Can I see him?" Rachel looked to Captain Rivera, who had just entered from the kitchen. The captain's uniform was smeared with what Rachel realized with a shock was blood. Max's blood. "The veterinary team is still working," Rivera said gently. "Give them a few more minutes, then we'll see." Lily nodded again, clutching her mother's hand tightly. "What happened?" Rachel asked Rivera quietly, steering Lily toward a chair away from the worst of the activity. Rivera's expression was a mixture of anger and grim satisfaction. Wilkins, or whoever he is, tried to force entry when Chen refused to let him in. Max prevented him from reaching you. She paused, choosing her words carefully with Lily nearby. The dog saved Chen's life. When Wilkins drew his weapon, Max intervened. The image that formed in Rachel's mind was all too clear. Max launching himself at an armed man to protect them, taking a bullet meant for Chen or possibly for them. Will he? Rachel couldn't finish the question with Lily listening. Rivera's gaze flicked to the child, then back to Rachel. The next hour will be critical, but he's survived this long against incredible odds. Don't count him out yet. A commotion at the front door drew their attention. 2 officers entered, carrying a box between them. The real files from Rachel's garage, the ones Thomas had kept of his veterinary practice. "Captain," one of the officers called, "we found something else at the Morgan residence. Hidden compartment in the garage, behind the file cabinet." He held up a small metal box, the kind used for storing important documents. It was locked with a simple combination dial. Max's reaction from the previous night suddenly made perfect sense. He hadn't just been recognizing Thomas in the photo, he'd been trying to tell them where to look. "That's Thomas's security box," Rachel said, moving toward it. "He kept important documents in it, birth certificates, insurance policies, that sort of thing." Rivera took the box, examining it carefully. Any idea what the combination might be? Rachel thought for a moment. Our anniversary, maybe? Or Lily's birthday? They tried both combinations without success. "It must be something significant," Rachel murmured, turning the box over in her hands. Something Thomas would remember easily, but not obvious to others. Lily, who had been watching quietly, suddenly spoke up. "Try Max's birthday." Rachel and Rivera both turned to the child in surprise. "Honey, we don't know when Max was born," Rachel explained gently. "Not his real birthday," Lily said with the simple logic of a child. "His work birthday. Daddy always said police dogs have 2 birthdays, the day they're born and the day they start work." Rivera's eyes widened slightly. She's right. Service dogs often have their commission date celebrated as a second birthday, and if your husband worked closely with Hayes and his unit... She pulled out her phone and made a quick call. "I need the commission date for K9 Officer Maximus, Handler Daniel Hayes. Yes, full 6-digit date." After a brief wait, Rivera jotted down a series of numbers. 07 5th time 19, July 15th, 2019. Rachel entered the numbers into the combination lock, 071519. With a satisfying click, the mechanism released. Inside the metal box was a single item, a waterproof evidence bag containing a USB drive and a handwritten note. The note, in Thomas's precise handwriting, read simply, "For Captain Rivera, in the event of my death, or if Max ever returns without Daniel." Rachel stared at the note, her husband's words reaching out to her across time. "He knew," she whispered. "Thomas knew something might happen to him." Rivera gently took the evidence bag, her expression solemn. "Your husband was a brave man, Mrs. Morgan. He must have been helping Hayes secure evidence outside official channels, a precaution that turned out to be necessary." "But why didn't he tell me?" Rachel asked, hurt mingling with pride in her voice. "To protect you and Lily," Chen suggested from his position on the couch. "The less you knew, the safer you were." Before Rachel could process this further, a veterinarian emerged from the kitchen, her scrub stained with blood, but her expression cautiously optimistic. "He's stabilized," she announced. "The bullet missed his vital organs, but he's lost a lot of blood and is severely weakened from his previous condition. The next 24 hours will be touch and go." "Can I see him?" Lily asked immediately, rising from her chair. The vet looked to Rachel for permission, then nodded. Briefly, "He's sedated but might respond to familiar voices." Rachel followed Lily into the kitchen, which had been transformed into a makeshift veterinary operating room. Max lay on a blanket on the floor, an IV line running into his leg, bandages wrapped around his chest. His breathing was shallow but regular. Lily approached slowly, kneeling beside the injured dog with a gentleness that brought tears to Rachel's eyes. "Hi, Max," she whispered, carefully placing her small hand on his head. "You were so brave. Now you have to get better, okay? We found what you were looking for." To Rachel's amazement, Max's tail moved slightly, just the barest thump against the blanket, but a clear acknowledgement of Lily's presence and words. "See, Mommy?" Lily looked up, her face brightening. He understands. He's going to be okay. Rachel knelt beside her daughter, placing her hand gently on Max's shoulder. Yes, sweetie, I think he is. Captain Rivera appeared in the doorway, the evidence bag containing the USB drive in her hand. We need to get this to a secure location immediately. The contents could put both of you in even more danger if the wrong people find out you had it. Rachel nodded her understanding. What about Wilkins? Did he talk? Not yet, Rivera's expression hardened. But he will. Max's identification of him as part of the trafficking organization is admissible evidence in court, given his training. Between that and whatever is on this drive, we might finally have enough to bring down the entire operation. She glanced at her watch, making a quick decision. I'm taking a team to analyze this evidence immediately. Officer Martinez will take over protective duty from Chen. Dr. Patel has arranged for Max to be transported to a secure veterinary facility where he can receive proper care. We're going with him, Lily stated with firm certainty, her hand still resting on Max's head. Rivera smiled slightly at the child's determination. Of course. We'll keep you all together under protection until this is resolved. It shouldn't be long now. As arrangements were made to transport Max and secure the safe house, Rachel found herself standing with Rivera by the front door. Captain, she said quietly, ensuring Lily couldn't overhear, there's something I don't understand. If Thomas was helping Hayes hide evidence, why did he never mention it to me? And why didn't he take precautions for his own safety? Rivera's expression softened with compassion. From what I knew of your husband, Mrs. Morgan, he wasn't the type to burden others with his worries. As for precautions, she gestured toward the evidence bag, he did take them, just not for himself. What do you mean? This evidence was hidden where only you would think to look for it, accessible only with information you or your daughter would know. He protected the evidence and he protected you by keeping you in the dark. Rivera placed a gentle hand on Rachel's shoulder. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is carry a burden alone, to spare those they love. The words, though meant as comfort, brought fresh pain. Had Thomas died not from natural causes, but because of his involvement in Hayes' investigation? Had his heart attack been entirely coincidental, or somehow induced to silence him? These were questions that might never be answered, Rachel realized. Thank you, she said simply, accepting that some mysteries might remain unsolved. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity and waiting. Max was transported to a veterinary hospital under police guard, with Rachel and Lily accompanying him. The bullet wound was cleaned and properly treated, additional antibiotics administered for his other injuries, and a slow blood transfusion began to replace what he had lost. Throughout it all, Lily refused to leave his side, reading stories to the sedated dog and assuring him in her small, confident voice that everything would be okay now. Rachel marveled at her daughter's resilience and compassion. In the span of 2 days, Lily had gone from a normal 5-year-old to a child who had faced genuine danger, witnessed violence, and still maintained her essential kindness. Thomas would have been so proud. Late that evening, as Lily finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell asleep in a chair beside Max's recovery kennel, Captain Rivera arrived with news. We've analyzed the contents of the drive, she reported, her face drawn with fatigue but her eyes bright with triumph. It's extraordinary. Hayes had compiled extensive evidence against the Kozlov organization, financial records, shipping manifests, surveillance photos, recorded conversations. But most damning of all, he had a list of corrupted officials within the department and city government who were facilitating the trafficking operation. And Wilkins was one of them, Rachel surmised. A mid-level player, Rivera confirmed, but the list goes much higher. We've already made 3 arrests, including a deputy commissioner and the harbor master. She glanced at Max, who lay sleeping under Lily's watchful protection. Hayes trained Max to recognize the scent of specific individuals connected to the organization, a form of canine facial recognition that couldn't be fooled by disguises or altered appearances. That's why they kept him alive all this time. They needed him to find anyone Hayes might have shared information with. Like Thomas, Rachel said softly. Yes, Rivera nodded. And they needed to recover the evidence Hayes had hidden. I suspect they were using Max to track down every person Hayes had contact with, one by one. Until Max escaped, Rachel concluded, and Lily found him. A remarkable coincidence, Rivera mused. Or perhaps not coincidence at all. Hayes and your husband clearly worked together to create this failsafe. Perhaps at some level, Max recognized your home, your scent, or something familiar that drew him to your neighborhood. The thought was both comforting and eerie, the idea that Max had somehow been drawn to them, guided by some invisible thread of connection to Thomas. "What happens now?" Rachel asked, glancing at her sleeping daughter. "Now we build our case," Rivera said firmly. "With the evidence from the drive and Max's identification abilities, we can finally dismantle this organization completely. It may take months to round up everyone involved, but the foundation has been laid." "And Max?" Rachel couldn't help asking. "What happens to him when this is over?" Rivera's expression softened as she looked at the sleeping German Shepherd. "Officially, he'll be retired from service with honors. As for where he'll live," she left the question hanging, but her meaning was clear. "We'd take him," Rachel said immediately, then hesitated. "If he wants to stay with us, that is." Rivera smiled. "I think he's already made that decision, don't you?" Looking at Max lying protectively near Lily even in his injured state, Rachel had to agree. The following days brought rapid developments. Based on the evidence Thomas and Hayes had preserved, arrests were made throughout the city. The trafficking operation that had operated with impunity for years began to crumble as key figures were taken into custody. Max's recovery proceeded more quickly than the veterinarians had predicted. Within 3 days, he was able to stand and walk short distances. By the end of the week, he was alert and active, though still weak from his ordeal. The media caught wind of the story. A heroic police dog, missing and presumed dead for 3 years, found by a 5-year-old girl, and instrumental in bringing down a major criminal organization. Reporters clamored for interviews, but Rivera kept them at bay, protecting Rachel and Lily's privacy. 10 days after the confrontation at the safe house, Captain Rivera organized a small, private ceremony at police headquarters. Officer Chen, now recovered from his injury, stood proudly as Max was officially retired from the K-9 unit with full honors. In recognition of extraordinary service, unwavering loyalty, and exceptional courage in the line of duty, Rivera read from the citation, K-9 Officer Maximus is hereby granted honorable retirement from the police force. She attached a special medal to Max's new collar, a gleaming silver star that caught the light as he sat at perfect attention despite his still healing wounds. Furthermore, Rivera continued, her voice carrying additional warmth, in recognition of the special bond formed through extraordinary circumstances, custody and care of K-9 Officer Maximus is hereby transferred to Lily Morgan and her mother Rachel Morgan, with all rights and privileges thereof. Lily's face lit up with pure joy as she knelt beside Max, wrapping her arms around his neck in a gentle hug. Max responded by licking her cheek once, his amber eyes bright with what could only be described as contentment. "He's really ours now?" Lily asked, looking up at her mother with wonder. "Really and truly," Rachel confirmed, blinking back tears. After the ceremony, they prepared to return home for the first time since their ordeal began. The house had been thoroughly checked and secured, with occasional police patrols to continue for the coming weeks as a precaution. As they stood in their front yard, Max paused, surveying the property with careful attention. Rachel could almost see him processing the transition, from police dog to family pet, from officer to guardian, from a life of service to one of well-earned peace. "Come on, Max," Lily called, already running toward the back door. "I want to show you my room." The German Shepherd looked up at Rachel, as if seeking final permission for this new chapter in his life. "Go on," she encouraged him with a smile. "You're home now." With a single bark of acknowledgement, Max trotted after Lily, his stride still showing hints of his professional past, but his demeanor relaxing with each step toward his new life. That evening, as Rachel prepared dinner, she glanced into the living room to find Lily reading a book aloud to Max, who lay with his head on her lap, completely at peace. The sight brought a surge of emotion, grief for Thomas mixed with gratitude for the unexpected blessing that had come into their lives through such unlikely circumstances. There would be challenges ahead, she knew. Max would need continued medical care and patience as he adjusted to civilian life. The investigation would continue for months, possibly requiring their testimony. And someday, she would need to tell Lily the full truth about her father's involvement in the case that had brought Max to them. But for now, in this moment of newfound equilibrium, Rachel allowed herself to simply be grateful. The broken pieces of their lives were finding new arrangements, not replacing what was lost, but creating something different and still beautiful. A month later, Rachel sat on their boang porch watching as Lily played fetch with Max in the yard. The German Shepherd's recovery had been remarkable, his strength and vitality returning more fully each day. He still maintained certain habits from his service days, positioning himself between Lily and the door at night, patrolling the perimeter of their yard each morning, remaining alert to unusual sounds or movements. But he had also discovered the simple joys of family life: afternoon naps in sunbeams, the luxury of belly rubs, the pleasure of unhurried walks through the neighborhood. Captain Rivera visited regularly, both to check on Max and to update them on the case. The evidence Thomas and Hayes had gathered had led to over 30 arrests, including several high-ranking officials. The trafficking route through their city had been completely dismantled, with investigations expanding to connected operations in other states. "We found something else you might want to see," Rivera said during her most recent visit, handing Rachel a photograph. It was in Hayes's personal effects, which were finally released from evidence storage. The photo showed Thomas and Officer Hayes standing together beside a younger Max, all three looking proud and purposeful. On the back, Hayes had written, "The 3 guardians, 2 legs and 4, working for those who can't speak for themselves." "They were friends," Rachel murmured, tracing Thomas's smiling face with her finger. "More than that," Rivera said. "They were partners in the truest sense. Hayes couldn't have done what he did without your husband's help, and those 2 couldn't have done it without Max." She watched as Max gently took a ball from Lily's hand, careful not to use his teeth. "Some dogs just know who the good people are," she observed, "and they never forget." As Rivera left, Rachel tucked the photo into a frame beside the one of Thomas that had helped them solve the mystery. Past and present, side by side, a complete picture at last. That night, after tucking Lily into bed with Max settled on his special cushion nearby, Rachel sat in the quiet living room, finally allowing herself to properly grieve for Thomas. Not just for his death, but for the parts of him she hadn't known, his courage, his willingness to risk everything to help Hayes fight a terrible injustice. "You should have told me," she whispered to his photo, "but I understand why you didn't." A soft whine drew her attention. Max had padded silently into the room and now stood watching her, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand her emotional state. "You miss them too, don't you?" she asked softly. "Hayes and Thomas." Max approached, resting his head on her knee in a gesture of simple comfort. Rachel stroked his ears, finding solace in the connection with this extraordinary animal who had, against all odds, found his way to them. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting her, for finding us, for everything." Max sighed contentedly, settling at her feet as if to say that no thanks were necessary, that this, simply being together, was all the reward he needed for his years of loyalty and courage. Outside, the first stars appeared in the evening sky, bearing silent witness to the resilience of those who remained behind, carrying on the work of the fallen, finding new ways to honor their memory through lives well lived. Inside, a woman, a child, and a dog who had each lost someone irreplaceable had formed a new family, different than what any of them had expected, but no less real, no less precious for the unexpected path that had brought them together. And in that quiet house, as night deepened around them, healing continued. One day, one moment, one shared breath at a time. This story reminds us that sometimes our greatest heroes walk on 4 legs, and that courage knows no species. If this touched your heart, please like, share, subscribe, and tell us in the comments about an animal who changed your life forever.